Well, welcome, Ben. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to say, I really appreciate you coming on, and just thank you for joining the summit. You were my very first person to hop on and commit, so I'm excited to have you here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having
You're
me.
very welcome. So, uh, for those of you who are listening, I know a little bit about Ben, but I wanted to give him the opportunity to tell us a little bit about who he is, what he does, his background, that sort of thing. So, would you mind just explaining, giving us a little bit about what you are and who you do, or who you are and what you do? Oh my!
Wow. We got really personal. So, for me, I am a self-empowerment coach, mainly focused in the LGBT community. I started that journey long, long time ago. I kind of put it in my bio as I grew up as the older brother taking care of two sisters. And with that responsibility and that growth there as being someone as a role model for people, I was always curious about doing things the right way, a better way, growing in a way that people could respect me. And for me, I just kind of always found myself in roles where I was connecting with people and helping them see the better picture. So even in like high school, middle school, elementary school, I would find kind of the kid that was the outlier, the one that wasn't hanging out with people, and I would help them find their worth. And I mean, I had lots of role models that did the same. My mom, my grandfather, like those people were very inspiring to me for the work that I was doing. Then I went through college for architecture. didn't didn't follow that path. I While I was in school, I was doing freshman counseling, working with international students. I was part of the honors program. So within all of those, I was finding leadership roles and self-empowerment roles where I could help orient people to college, help orient people to the United States. So when I was done with college, I was just like, I am not enjoying architecture. So I was like, what did I enjoy about college? What did I enjoy about previous jobs? And it was just the ability to help people. And that's kind of when it clicked. I finally got a role within a corporate company to do leadership coaching. And that was just like I was on cloud nine. Uh, in 2021, that company disappeared because it merged with another company. So my position disappeared. So I made the leap of doing this full time as a self empowerment coach. It was nice because then that's when I got to kind of focus fully on the LGBT community and actually be there. So I fell in love with it. There was a lot to learn of running your own business, but I was willing to take that learning curve because my passion was coaching and working with people who, I mean, lived very similar stories to my own when it came to being told LGBT isn't right. Uh, and I knew how limiting that could make people believe they were in the real world. So I wanted to empower them so that the LGBT community could exist in leadership roles and powerful roles that can make positive change for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when faced with adversity, we become stronger, and I think as our community is historically faced a lot of adversity and a lot of struggles and challenges. I think as a community, we have such a it's like an iceberg. There's such a depth of strength within the community. So I think that's great that you're helping people to ignite that and to really bring that to the forefront and also become aware of it in themselves. Sometimes people aren't always aware of just how strong they are.
Yeah, I think that that's probably where like my turning point was when I realized that what I was saying and doing was creating that change for other people and helping them make that realization. So I found my power in being able to help others. And I think that each of us have something that we can give to the communities we serve that will empower us and empower the people around us.
Absolutely. I like how you looked at your life after college and you knew that you didn't want to necessarily be an architect, but you asked yourself the question, what do I enjoy? Sometimes people are they find difficulty in learning and discovering what their passions are and what ignites their spirit and their soul and makes them happy. uh, what would you say to somebody who's in that situation that is maybe wondering, they're in a situation in life where they are confused or unhappy, or they're struggling? What would you say to them at that point?
I think for people who may be confused what brings them joy or happiness, have an exact idea of what would actually bring them happiness, but at some point they've been told by someone that they trust or admire their power that that is not what happiness is
Mhm.
and defined as. So we have to erase those because a lot of times it's ill-intended advice. Maybe those people gave up on their dream or were told by someone else that that is not what happiness
Yeah.
is, and then they steer you down the wrong way. And sometimes we have to spin back around and run right back towards what we were just told will never bring us happiness or success, because I think most people really know, but there's something in front of it saying you're not allowed to do this. That's actually not true, and I want people to realize that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot of situations in our lives where, from my own perspective, where I was told you don't want to be gay, just as a fundamental thing. And then I adopted that as my own mantra, that I thought to myself, oh God, no, I don't want to be gay, because if I am, that means I can't get a job, or it's more difficult. I can't have kids, all these different things that happen in your brain that you make, true just from a little tiny seed of somebody saying, no, you can't do this.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times we categorize such large groups of people with certain stereotypes or what you have to be a part of this community. And I mean, from a very young age, we are born into communities, then we grow up and we serve communities and become part of new communities. And I think that there's sets of rules that exist. Even within the LGBT community, there are a lot of different communities within our groups. And I think that when people jump into communities, there's rules that are kind of just set in stone that we're just trained to believe that we have to follow those rules. And I think that once you kind of get out of that mindset and realize you have the power to create your own rules and find a community that aligns with you, I think that that is where people kind of find their power. Because I've been in a lot of communities where my power was stripped
Mm.
from me and I didn't believe I had high value. But then I stepped out of that community and found my place in a community that appreciated what I had to give. And my value went all the way back up. And I was like, how is this possible? And I just started digging more into that.
I love that, because that's so true. A lot of our foundation for our courage, for our strength, for our self compassion, for our confidence, it all comes from the reflection that we see in other people of how we show up. And when that, it just speaks to how important environment is. When you're surrounded by people that are lifting you up, 2 + 2 = 10. But if you're surrounding yourself and you're in a community, in a situation, which some people are unable, or there are aspects of it that they're unable to change at the moment. But when you're in that situation and people are pulling you down, then 2 + 2 = -10. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And to that point, you're actually starting to promote something that creates more communities, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I really found that for me to really feel empowered, I had to start surrounding myself with people who had similar mindsets or mindsets that I hoped to achieve. So I started creating a community where growth minded people, empowered people who are also the type that want to empower the people around them come together. And share vulnerabilities, share struggles, share authenticity. And within that, we've been able to kind of see where our self saboteurs are, see where our strengths are, see where our limiting beliefs exist. Because I think that we walk through life and those things just kind of stick on to us, and we just accept that as this is how everyone's living life. And when you start to see other people who are successful in an area where you want it to be, living by rules that are not the same as yours, you're like, well, how did you get here? And I'm stuck living in these rules. And it's like, well, these are rules that you've just accepted here. So I think community is the easiest way for you to kind of find your limitations that you've put on yourself. Because if you're just always looking at what you've got, you won't realize that there's so many more like options out there. Like one of my friends made a joke about it being like the multiverse. Like we each have a multiverse living in
Oh
here
yeah.
because the vision of who I think you are will be different than the vision of someone who knows you in person versus someone who met you in a grocery store. Like who you are is defined by the moments we've shared with each other in here, and who you think you are is going to be different then. But you can't figure any of that out if you're not communicating and creating community with other people.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because identity, we've spoken before. Identity for me is a huge source of fascination and something that I think is an ever evolving learning process because who we are changes moment to moment based on so many different factors. But one of the things is the stories that we tell ourselves. So I think that's creating and holding a wonderful place and space where people can explore that and do so with curiosity and playfulness. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest example of how you can kind of see your moment to moment change is like going back to like a high school, like where you had a very defined like you, and then coming back 10 years later, 20 years later to these people. And it's getting harder to do that because we've got social media to keep up with each other. But when you leave a community where you had a very defined
Yep.
you, and you leave for several years and redefine yourself in so many different ways and come back, you're coming back to a community of people who still see you as that person 10 years ago. And it's weird to fit into a place and realize I don't fill that role anymore. And that's just an example of you naturally, like you can't stay in high school forever. But coming back to a place that you've definitely grown away from and just seeing how much you've changed. But the people that you're re meeting at that moment, they don't have that gap of information between then and
Right.
now to define you. They're still defining you by who you were to them back in high school.
Yeah, it's a challenge when dealing with people who are having relationship issues, because each of us, like you're saying, we hold one another in this. We hold each other captive in this container of what we think that you should be or I should be. And when you're in a romantic relationship, if there's challenges and maybe you met and that you held yourselves and you were this person, but then time went by and you grew or life changed or they grew, and then suddenly either you or they are a different person, we're still stuck in what that previous mold was. So
Um,
that's I love that you bring that up. That's fantastic.
yeah, I mean, I think that the healing point of a relationship is right from the beginning, set the intention that we're going to grow from this, who we are when we first met. If you understand that concept right from the beginning, like you will adapt and change together versus realizing that this is who you have to be when you're in the relationship. You go out here to grow and then come back here and play a role, grow out here. And then eventually, this area here isn't going to be fun to come back to because you've grown so much out here that this just feels small and confined. So you go back out. That's usually where people's minds are just like, they don't see this relationship as something that needs to come out with them and
Right.
grow.
Yep. So speaking about opportunities of growth, what would you say is, or was, I should say, what was one of the biggest obstacles that you faced in your life that you've grown from and that you've learned from?
I think my biggest one has been boundaries and being able to create them in a healthy way. I think being someone who most of my life was people pleasing. I believed that I needed to do whatever other people wanted me to do so that they would like me. So I would lay boundaries, but I would never stand behind them because if someone would let me know that they felt like one of my boundaries was unfair, I'm just like, okay, we'll break that one. And it got to the point where I had no boundaries. And then when I was trying to tell people they needed to back up, I came off as like this rude
Mm,
person because I just told them I have no boundaries. Come on in. But then when they hit a place where I was just like, I don't want you here, I came off as rude. And when it came to setting healthy boundaries, I started to realize it wasn't me being rude. It was me asking them to show respect to me as a person. And when I started laying those healthy boundaries and people were respecting them, it actually created a healthier relationship with me and that person where I could say no if I didn't want to do something. And I could say, hey, you're crossing that
mm.
boundary. And it was sorry instead of a attack at me for being the person who never had boundaries. And it's not always easy to do that, but the boundaries definitely saved me in the long run.
Yeah, boundaries are so important, and when you allow somebody else to break them, you're talking to them, but you're also talking to yourself. And you're saying to yourself that, oh, it's okay for people to trample on those boundaries. And it's okay for me to say one thing and mean an entirely other thing, rather than holding in your integrity and saying, okay, this is me. And that reinforces it with yourself. And that it becomes an echo chamber that gets stronger and stronger, or weaker and weaker.
Yeah. And I got the full effect of that. And I realized that those boundaries were important. So I think that the more boundaries people lay down for themselves as a respect, you'll realize that you'll start to love yourself
Mhm.
more because boundaries are pretty much you saying, I love you enough to give you this space that you need to do whatever you need to do.
Boy, that's a simple and beautiful definition of a boundary. I love it. So,
Yeah.
so we talked about some of your challenges. What would you say is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Childhood memories. Okay. So I have always been an outdoors person. So put me on a beach, put me on a mountain, anywhere outdoors, like I'm going to love. So favorite childhood memories would probably be when my family would go camping
Mhm.
and just be outdoors because it's almost like nature removes all the roles that people put on us in the real world. And I even noticed this in 2020 when I went out to a waterfall that I really love. And I felt like in society there was so much tension on like what color your skin was, what gender you're identifying as, what community you're a part of, and like it was just so like freeing to go out into nature and we all existed and we were just enjoying nature because the social constructs don't really exist there. And even like as a child, like my grandfather was like the head honcho, and then there was my grandmother, then my dad and my mom. But like when we were in nature, it was like my dad became a child again, which I could connect to on a level I could not connect to him out in the real world.
Mhm.
Not that nature isn't the real world, but it didn't have that boundary that I couldn't cross because I was a child and he was a dad or adult. He would be playing and splashing and just having fun, and I could connect with him on fun. Whereas all the other things that put up boundaries between us, or walls, I should say, instead of boundaries, since we just gave boundaries such a positive definition, walls. uh, but I think that going out into nature really helped me in that sense that I could connect with people in ways that society didn't allow us to connect before.
Love that. So speaking of your grandfather and your father, um, those are kind of role models as we're growing up. As you are now, who would you say is a role model or mentor that you look up to right now?
So alive, I would say Jay Shetty is someone that I've really connected to his work. I connected with him when he was doing just YouTube content. And of course, with my background in creating content online, I was just like, oh, there's someone actually using YouTube to do mind work and help people here. And I felt very alone in that aspect for a very long time because I was sharing very vulnerable stories and I was noticing most people were doing like pranks or silly videos to get laughs, and I was just like, I don't know if social media has a space for this type of work. And when I connected with him and saw what he was doing, and then got to know his story, got to meet at a VidCon event, then of course I did a book tour where I got to see him here in DC recently. And I was just like, everything he was saying was just like things that I had said. I was even sitting there with my boyfriend and I was like, I say that. I say that. So it was really nice to get to meet his wife this past time. I got to meet him a while back when I was at a YouTube event. But I would definitely say the things he does and says and his goals are things that very much align with what I see myself doing.
So speaking of your boyfriend, what would you say makes a successful relationship?
You have to be willing and open to see each other for who you are and not try to change one another for your own personal
Mm,
reasons. Like, you have to be ready for growth. Like, you can't hold a space and say, this is what relationships are, this is who we are. It's just exploring that and realizing we both have strengths in different areas, and you have to celebrate each other's strengths and help each other grow where weaknesses
mhm.
exist. Um, because it's really easy to compare yourself to each other and see, oh, this person has this and I don't. Well, okay, grow from that, learn. And I think for me, I'm a very social person, so he's been able to use my ability to be social to kind of start to grow his own social group and connections with
Uh,
people. Whereas he's very stable. And for me, that has been something that I have not had very much witness to in life. So my life has always been work over here, over here, over here, over here, and just all over the place. Where he is just this like, he can concentrate on one project, complete it, and there's like a calm about that. And I've been learning a lot about how to kind of navigate life a little smoother like
mm.
that, because the bouncing around like I was doing can create a lot of chaos.
Yeah, it definitely there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of research behind how our brain, even though we think that we can multitask, that our brain is actually wired in a linear fashion when we're focusing on things. So, yeah, that it can be detrimental, I think, if you're focusing on too many things at one time.
Yeah, it's always funny because he always points out that I'm the life coach, and I'm like, well, I can life coach people, but like I still need people to like help me see where I'm making mistakes and where I could do better. And in that way, he helps me in those areas. So it's very
That's
useful.
awesome. So, going back to something that you mentioned about Jay Shetty and the goals that he has, and how you find a lot of alignment in that. If you were to, if we were to fast forward magically in a television, or I don't know, at that point a 3D VR thing, and we saw you, at the end of your life, and you were to be, receiving an Oscar for lifetime achievement, what would you want that lifetime achievement award to be for or about?
Gosh, I would love personally to be recognized for the work that I do to try to connect people. I think the world does such a good job of dividing us. And I think that if I could be recognized as someone who brought people together at the end of the day, because even within the LGBT community, I think there's still a lot of division. And the work that I do, I really do believe if you can sit down with someone who is completely different than you at the surface level, you would really see that we're all the
Yeah.
same at the core. We're human. We're really trying to find the same things in life, but we're all taught different ways of doing it. And it doesn't serve us well to not connect with one another. So, if at the end of my life, uh, I was known as the person who spent my whole life connecting and somehow managed to connect people in a really amazing way, that would be phenomenal.
I love that. Yeah, there's far more that creates similarities in us than than differences. So I think that when we lose the importance of what those differences are, that's when we can really find the common ground and the similarities. So yeah, I think that's you're spot on with that.
Yeah. It's weird when it came to like energies and connecting with people. Um, I found that two people that I've connected with on a level that was unexplainable. Uh, I connected with two people who were trans and different parts of the world. One lived here with me in Virginia for a little bit, but he moved. And then my other friend, she lives in California. But the conversations we had was almost like our energies were
Mm,
dancing. And the more we talked, was I started to realize that we have all done a lot of self work. We've done a lot of self understanding to the point where we could ask each other anything. There was no offense taken. We knew that the questions were coming from a place of understanding, and I was just like, wow, this feels really good to be in a place where like I could ask about their income, I could ask about their childhood, I could ask about transitioning, and they could deep dive into whatever they wanted about me. And there wasn't a moment where we were uncomfortable. We were just enjoying being around each other. And like, it was just like this instant pump of like positive, high frequency
yeah.
energy. And I was just like, what is this? And it was just the removal of all the judgment and stereotypes and labels and everything else that people walk around with. And I was like, wow, we're having a conversation without any of that existing here. And it felt amazing. How can I make more of this?
There you go. Yeah, the community is, I think the rainbow community is incredibly resilient. It's got an untapped depth of resilience and creativity and strength. But like you said, there are definitely, I think we live in these silos of what we, who we connect with, who we talk to, the people and stories and relationships that we're even aware of. And that's part of why, why I've been trying to create this summit, is so that we can see the different facets of the community as a whole, rather than just this narrow fragment of what we see on a daily basis, or what we hear or even read in the papers or online.
Yeah, I think when it comes to what's promoted online and in Hollywood or in the news is what someone else believes will serve their agenda. And I mean, that's why I started doing positive talks and start reaching out to everyone. And there are so many people who are like, I don't have anything inspiring. And I was like, every single person on this planet can talk and inspire others. I
Yep.
was like, it's just, are you willing to come on alive and speak in front of people? Because no matter what you talk about, you will connect with other people. And I think the more, and I always tell every queer person that I've spoken to, I'm like, write a book, create a podcast, do something, put the story out, because my journey is only going to connect with so many people and it'll probably only connect in really small fragments. But if I can bring more people to the stage and tell their story, I think that that's a phenomenal thing because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had long messages sent to me after a positive talk. And they're like, I absolutely loved this guest. I finally realized that I'm not alone. And I'm like, yes, that's the point of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of popcorn questions. So just what just a
Okay.
quick whatever comes to your mind. What favorite movie?
Ooh, Lion King.
Favorite song?
Yes. Favorite song is Wasted by Carrie Underwood.
Love it. What book would you recommend to listeners?
Ah, so many. I'm surrounded by them. I would honestly say that Jay Shetty's Book of Love, like the 8 Rules of Love right now, since I did just read it twice in a row, I think that that would be a book that anyone, whether you're single, in a relationship, struggling with love and connection with the world, I think that that really strips away all the like things that we're taught that love
Mhm.
is and replaces it with love can be what you want it to be, and it creates that self-love first and then shows you that love is a service that you can give to the world in any way, shape, or form you want to.
Mm,
So definitely a great book.
love it. What's a favorite pickup line?
A pickup line. Oh boy. I suck at those types of things. I'm usually the person that people use them on me and I'm oblivious to them. But I'm usually pretty straightforward and I will give like a very intense compliment like, "Oh my god, I love your smile. Oh my god, your eyes are just captivating." And like that usually makes me sweat, but like people take compliments well and it usually sparks some type of
I
conversation.
love it. So speaking of that, favorite body part?
Eyes.
Biggest pet peeve about a boyfriend? Doesn't have to be the
Mm.
current one.
Biggest pet peeve for me has always been someone calling me out and telling me I can't do something, and then they do it themselves.
Okay. If you could interview one famous person, who would it be?
Mm. I would say to like move away from Jay Shetty since we've spoken about him so many times. I would say I would love to speak to Carrie Underwood. I think that there's been so many interviews where they just take her down a path that I'm just like, no one cares about that. I want to talk to her about more meaningful things because I think that she's gone through so many things in life that she would have something better to say than talking about her album or her life with her husband and
Right.
kids.
And what is something that you do for your mental health on a daily basis?
Daily basis, for me, the shower is very important. I drink water and then I stand in the shower, and it's kind of a place where I allow all my senses to ignite. So, like, I feel the water touching my skin, I smell the shampoo, and like, I will stare at the water to where it's almost like putting me in a
Oh,
daze.
wow.
But, like, that's like my area because it's something I do every day where I realized a lot of us walk through life and sometimes we're on autopilot. Like the shower, since it's usually the first thing I do in the morning, is like that first place where I remove myself off of autopilot and allow myself to feel everything that's existing around me.
Nice. So I wanted to say thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. Where can listeners find you online? What would be the best place for them to go?
So right now you're looking at drum and culture pretty much across all social media platforms. And then Positive Space is the new place where I'm growing that community. So, and that links within the drum and culture realm of things, but Positive Space and drum and culture is where you would find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing. And I look forward to your presentation and your talk.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I'm
Thank you.
excited.